I'm someone who believes that beyond our individual efforts, there is always something up in the air, and the universe constantly moves in a certain direction. It's for us to actually read the signs. The previous generation had the rough end of the stick. When they were trying to put out genuine scholarship, they were pushed to penury, they were pushed to infamy and whatnot. They were completely marginalized. That particular generation has done what I would call the Vishapanam. It has actually swallowed the poison. And this generation continues to swallow the poison, but to a significantly lesser extent. Thankfully, because there are tools of internet and whatnot, where there's a democratization of opinion that's possible, and there's a shaping of opinion that is possible. And therefore, we are reaping the benefits of that. So my point is, clearly something is afoot, and there is a gradually enlarging captive audience to these thoughts, both in the realm of pop culture, in the realm of fiction, in the realm of non-fiction, everywhere. And therefore, I draw hope from the fact that it can only go up from here, it can't go down. क्योंकि इससे नीचे और कैसे जा सकते हैं? हम नीचे थे और यहीं से ऊपर ही जाना पड़ेगा, because if this is, let's say, a bell curve, I think we are on the ascent at this point. And hopefully this process will continue for some time. Therefore, the job is to try and create more people and groom more people in terms of creating an institutional mechanism. So I draw hope from that. 5 years ago, I don't think people would have spoken on the question of temple freedom. Today, there's a huge chorus of voices on this particular subject. 5 years or 6 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to reach out to a vast cross-section of youngsters on subjects such as these. Not just me, so many people. And since the youth have started showing a significant degree of interest in these topics and they've started reading, that tells me that you're investing in the right demographic, which is the most important and the all-critical demographic. So there's a very realistic basis for my sense of hope that the tide has started turning to some extent, and we are turning the corner for the better. Now, coming to the practicalities of the exercise of decoloniality. Now, here my answer is going to be slightly more guarded, because we have to realize that the entire world stands integrated in the European system or the Western normative system. Almost. There may be a few islands in, let's say, Middle East or elsewhere, but anybody else is significantly operating within the rules that the West has formulated at least a century ago. Whether it's with respect to the military-industrial complex, or with respect to economics, or what constitutes development, what is the first world, what is the third world, all these questions, we are still addressing it in the European paradigm, which tells us that even the best of decolonial societies are still within the European mold. So what are we then looking at? I am looking at a hybrid future. We are still in a hybrid future. We will still move towards a hybrid future. The question will be, what will be the blend of this hybridity? The current blend of hybridity is significantly tilting towards Westernization and hence modernization as defined by the European or the Westerner. And the hope is that we will move towards greater multilateralism and pluralism in the realm of culture as well as in the realm of politics. And therefore, a decolonial movement by a huge machine, a huge society called Bharat, is bound to create a domino effect, at least in the East, where you're looking at a hybridity which significantly skews in favor of indigeneity. It's impossible for us to completely throw it off. At least I don't have the far sight and, let's say, the vision to say कि इतने सालों में ये हो जाएगा. I see the West still having a significant degree of say, at least for another 50-60 years. Let's see what happens after that. But these 50-60 years, while they may continue to have a certain degree of dominance, they are looking at an increased rate of cession of space. They are looking at losing ground to the East, and that they themselves are aware of. Whether it's China or Arab or other countries put together, Europe is going to see a plateauing of its ability to remain at the top, and it's going to start ceding space in all departments. I am basically putting hope in the fact that if we were to invest in rigorous scholarship and come out with policy formulations and policy prescriptions, we can hope to move towards a hybridity that is significantly in favor of Bharatiya indigeneity. And maybe there are certain aspects which you may have to retain in the interest of engaging with the rest of the world. But beyond that, I certainly believe that that hybridity is much better than the current self-loathing hybridity that we are currently living in. That needs to go. Let me say this with a fair degree of realpolitik at play, that when you hope to unseat an, let's say, a power which has been entrenched for, let's say, 5 centuries now, don't expect the reactions to be civil or remotely, let's say, polite, because they don't want to be dislodged. They don't want to be told that their time is up. And therefore, the reactions will be as brutal as it gets. And therefore, I think it's for us to let's say I don't want to use the phrase man up because then I'll be accused of misogyny. I'll simply say, get ready for a fight because this is not going to be easy. The only thing that you can hope is that you shall conduct yourself in a manner that is consistent with dharmic ethos, which means if a civil reaction begets a civil reaction, then you stick to that line of approach. But if a civil reaction begets an uncivil reaction, then dharma says respond to it in a manner that it understands and respond to it in a language that it understands. Because as much as we try and have these conversations in perfumed, air-conditioned atmospheres, the fact of the matter is, you know this better than I do, that the politics of academia is perhaps worse than national politics. There are huge inflated egos everywhere. And our dear friend Sri Vikram Sampath, the scholar who's just put out a wonderful series, a tome on Veer Savarkar, is just bearing the brunt for putting out rigorous scholarship and for putting the truth out in public domain, which tells us that established powers and established guardians do not like this one bit. While I certainly appreciate the expectations of civility, I think I've long lost that innocence and naivete to expect civility in these debates. So I don't operate from those notions anymore. I will do whatever it takes to put the truth out, at least to the best of my ability. And in the process, I'll try to be as civil as I can because that's my upbringing and that's my culture. But if that is taken as a sign of weakness, well, Shatra is something that Dharma teaches. We'll respond. Please hold on to the family structure, believe in it, and realize that the next generation learns its values first from the family. Therefore, it is the first line of defense in growing a filter to deal with everything else outside. Therefore, the decolonial filter to deal with the external coloniality comes from the family. And the only way that the family does this is, first of all, by insisting on speaking at least in the mother tongue within the confines of the home as much as possible. The child must know the mother tongue. The child must be able to read in it, must be able to write in it. There are cognitive advantages for this, but more than that, I'm looking at cultural importance, not just cognitive advantages. And it's important for them to be exposed to that particular literature. Now, why should they be exposed to that particular literature? Is because literature written in Indic languages, at least in the 18th and 19th centuries, were the gold standard of scholarship because they were as blunt and truthful as they could get. And when you compare those versions of history with the sanitized versions which are then presented in English, you get to see what kind of dilution history has gone through when, let's say, there's a loss in translation between Indian languages and English. So I think it's important for them to be exposed to that. And when you're exposed to your own mother tongues, you're exposed to the universe of your culture through the idioms, through the proverbs, and ultimately language is the carrier of history. So you understand, you try and understand where all of this comes from. And there's not a single Indian language which doesn't have a reference from either the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. Automatically, you will have to ask yourself, where is the simile of a squirrel contributing a pebble coming from? You'll have to ask these questions. So therefore, you'll be exposed to that. 3, the least that a Dharmic or an Indic family can do is to take an active interest in a place of worship closest to it and take an active interest in the running of its affairs and contribute to it significantly and use the temple as the nerve center for dissemination of cultural values and try and make it as useful as possible for those who do not have resources. These are things which at a very local level, every person and every family can do, because not everybody needs to have a macro solution to a macro problem. Sometimes macro problems have micro solutions. And once this movement starts, you're looking at a much more informed and less colonialized audience, which would then be in a much better position to come out with solutions. So I gave this example recently. In cricket, you had to move from, let's say, a Kapil Dev to an Azharuddin, then you had to move to Saurav Ganguly, and today you have a Virat Kohli. There's a serious, let's say, difference in confidence. So in civilizational battles, confidence is bound to increase with every generation. So have a fairly long-term vision and have a certain degree of patience. Start doing those things which are within your control and hope that your next generation has what it takes to preserve this culture and take it forward, and that they're much more enthused to read up about their culture than we were. That's the hope. That's the least that we can do.